Good afternoon, family. I hope all is well, and welcome to Coffee and Conversations, the development of our Inclusive Excellence Plan. I'm really excited to be with you today because we have some extraordinary campus leaders who are going to help us understand exactly how we came to the good work of our Inclusive Excellence Plan. Let me first start by saying that I know many of you saw my remarks earlier today. And I want to begin with letting you know how deeply touched I am that so many of you have already written me to certainly wish me well and to talk about the work that we've done together. And there'll be plenty of time for us in the coming weeks to share reflections and time together. So that is to come. And so this is a bittersweet moment for me and for all of us, but we'll have plenty of time to celebrate that. We'll also know that our Board of Trustees are working very closely and preparing, and I'll be working closely with them to prepare for what's to come. And so you'll hear more about that in the days and weeks ahead. But today is really about thinking about the college's future and how we want to be that extraordinary example of inclusive excellence. Today is about honoring the work of those who have come throughout the course of the planning and preparation of helping us to become better and stronger and wiser around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm extraordinarily proud of the charge that I gave with the Steps Beyond Statements group to really think deeply about all of our systems, all of our structures that impact both our employees and our students, and to ensure that we begin to really press and move forward to make our institution a model. And it is one of the reasons why I'm proud we received the HEAT Award, Higher Education's Excellence in Diversity Award, one of the highest awards that an institution can receive. And I'm very proud of the work that you did to get us there. And so today we're going to hear a little bit from the folks that did some of the work around the diversity, equity, inclusion efforts here. And so we'll begin with a conversation on campus participation, and then we'll talk a little bit about the process, and I'll be able to ask some questions of our great folks. So we'll begin with talking about that process and timeline. So let me start by asking Melissa Roy to just say a word to us because they were the employee experience co-chairs. Melissa, you're on mute.
Good afternoon, Dr. Baston and colleagues. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today we have both Christina Merriweather and Stephen Burke, who will be answering a number of questions about both the work that was done by the Employee Experience Working Group and the Steps Beyond Statements Working Group. And so I'll start by asking Christina to tell us about the campus participation that we had for the Employee Experience Working Group.
Certainly. Thank you, Melissa. So as you can see on the screen, we had a number of different staff and employees and faculty who participated in this employee experience group. So it was a very wide cross section of employees across the college that worked together over the course of a few months to gather information, to brainstorm, and to really be thoughtful and intentional about creating opportunities to better the employee experience here at RCC. So there you can see the names listed of those who participated in those working groups.
Awesome. Christina, while you're there, could you tell us about the key topics that were covered?
Yes, absolutely.
On the phases.
Yes, absolutely. And so the 4 areas that we focused our work on was around candidacy. So at the point that someone is looking to apply for positions at RCC and how we go about advertising opportunities for employment at the college. We had a working group, which is a working group that I served on with my co-chair, Sunny Reyes, was the new hire experience and making sure that once we do hire exemplary staff coming in and faculty coming in, that there is some consistency and some intentionality around their onboarding process. And so our working group focused on the new hire experience. Next, we had the professional development and achievements committee, or working group, excuse me, that focused really on, making sure that we value the development of our employees here at RCC. That again, the key word is intentionality and consistency around how we value employee contributions, how we are developing the next generation of leaders here at RCC, and really building that legacy. And so that is the professional development and achievements working group. And then last but certainly not least, we had a transition working group that really focused on what do we do as we assist employees who are transitioning out of RCC for myriad of reasons, but making sure that there is opportunity to gather feedback from them, and also to make sure that they have a successful transition out from RCC, and that we also have a plan to potentially keep them engaged. So those were the four areas we focused on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christina. Stephen, would you tell us about Steps Beyond Statements and the campus participation you had there?
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, everybody. Great to be with you this afternoon. Yes, Steps Beyond Statements. Dr. Baston came to my great co-chair, Allegra, and I think it was the summer of 2020. I was a young man then, very enthusiastic. And it was, the time period, there was a lot going on, the pandemic, but also, we all know how much unrest there was going on regarding social issues and police activity. And as Dr. Baston had convened a lot of really interesting and challenging conversations around the campus. But he said to us, he gave us this charge. He said, I know how much that diversity, equity, and inclusivity is at the core of RCC's mission, values, and vision. But like every organization, many organizations can say that. I want you to convene and lead this effort that encompasses the entire college, staff, faculty, and students working together to put an action plan together, so that we're not just talking about these values, but we are putting actionable steps taking to see that these values and this vision in action, and then we position RCC as not just a leader, but the leader among community colleges. So, simple tasks. Allegra and I were really fortunate to be joined by just some really extraordinary colleagues around the campus. Dr. LaToya Blunt and Dina Rossados very graciously agreed to step in and really co-chair our working group, which I'll explain a little bit later about some of the incredible activities that the working group oversaw. And the working group encompassed a number of really extraordinary students, faculty, and staff. Just to give you, and I don't want to, call out everybody. They all really made intense commitments. We met practically every week for a while to work on these projects, and everybody pitched in. For example, you're going to hear later on about these focus groups that we put together. We really were able to draw on people's expertise about creating and analyzing focus groups. Somebody like Shaquana Cotton, our trio coordinator, and her expertise was instrumental in doing that, and getting students involved in that, and training students to do this work with us. Nancy Kester from IR, her data knowledge and experience was super important to our success. So we drew upon everybody throughout the college, and people who are beyond this group were really helpful to us. And throughout the whole process, we had the guiding spirit and experience of Jojo McManus, our consultant extraordinaire, which is actually what it says on his work on his business card, which is pretty amazing. Who's got tremendous experience at CUNY in California and around the country as a chief diversity officer, but also as a consultant in helping us to do it. And without him, we could not have done this project.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And it really was critical that we had participation from across campus for both of these huge initiatives. That was critical to Dr. Baston and I as we talked about putting the teams together. And I think when you look at the work that was done, you see that we got the benefit of so many different experiences and ideas that were brought to the table. Dr. Baston, I'll turn it back over to you as we talk about process.
And part of what I really enjoyed about listening to all of the different perspectives is really thinking deeply about sort of how we could get better as an institution. That we looked at data and we did not just look at numbers, but we listened to people, that we actually engaged wide swaths of the community so that there was a real sense of voice that was a part of the conversation. And I just think that that is such a very important critical piece of this work together. Melissa, what did you do with the recommendations you received from the working groups?
Thank you. So before I get there, let them tell you what their process involved.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you exactly what we did with it. Christina.
Sure. So for the employee experience working groups, we took several steps to get to the point of offering recommendations to our co-chairs, Melissa and Natalie. So here, as you see listed, we really started with looking at what existed already. So, we wanted to make sure we immersed ourselves in relevant documents that we already had, whether they were college policies, practices, procedures. So we wanted to make sure we knew what existed before we tried to, reinvent the wheel here. And so once we exhausted what we could find that was relevant to our work here at the college, we also wanted to look at comparable institutions and see what they did. And so, for example, in the new hire group, we were looking at what were other onboarding processes like at other community colleges, and what can we maybe draw from those experiences and those models to maybe implement here or recommend to implement here at RCC. So we started with that. And then we also wanted to also get additional qualitative data by talking to key constituents at the college, whether they were union leaders or human resources. We had meetings as well just to see what were their perspectives, what are some things they were thinking about in terms of how we could better enhance the process. We conducted focus groups, interviews, and surveys so that we could try to reach as many individuals at the college as possible to get feedback on what their experiences have been like touching each of those 4 areas that we were concentrating on. And so that data also informed us of what recommendations that we could put forth. From that point, after we gathered as much information as we could, we drafted some recommendations within each of our working groups, and we shared that with the co-chairs and got feedback so that we could revise or make sure that we were very clear in what our recommendations were moving forward. And then from there, the employee experience co-chairs presented these recommendations to the Board of Trustees. Actually, let me back up a moment. So first, it was presented to Executive Cabinet. We received feedback, the working groups revised, and then re-presented our ideas back to the co-chairs, and then it was presented to the Board of Trustees. And then from there, once we kind of got the green light to move forward with our recommendations, we wanted to make sure we put action to the things that we recommended. And so we went about within each of our respective working groups, assigning a timeline, assigning ownership of different departments to make sure that this work will be moved forward.
Christina, what did you think about that process?
So I think personally, I thought it was very helpful. One, because I still consider myself fairly new to RCC. And so really digging into what policies existed or maybe previously existed that weren't followed or needed to be tweaked, it was really helpful for my own knowledge. There were just pieces of self-discovery for myself. So I think that was really helpful. And then really just being able to get the different perspectives. I love the data. We got really rich data back from the surveys. Our working group did a survey specifically, and to see some of the feedback, it was really enlightening and in some way validating because it was like, oh, okay, so I'm not the only person that thought this or maybe experienced this. But ultimately, though, everyone was really passionate about wanting to continue to improve. And also just acknowledging that there's some things that we do that's really great, especially when we were looking at other institutions that were like, oh, you guys, we do this here at RCC. They don't even do that there. And what a shame, right? And so I think there was a lot of illumination for me during that process.
Processes like these really allow you to level set. really allow you to kind of get a sense of, you may not be as far advanced as you want to be, but you also may not be as behind as other places. So it is a bit of an encouragement because we have as a goal to really be a national leader in inclusive excellence. So thank you so much, Christina, for sharing the process. How about you, Stephen? Could you talk a little bit about the process with steps beyond statements? You're on mute.
It's not like I've been on Zoom before. Thanks, Dr. Baston. Absolutely. We took a number and we could try to consolidate this all on one slide. A lot of the tremendous activity that went on. One of the first major tasks that we did was as you said, we needed to have conversation. We needed to gather data. We needed to know where we are, what we're doing, what's working, what the gaps are we need. So we conducted an institutional self-assessment on equity practices at RCC. And of course, these are tough conversations and they're uncomfortable conversations, but it was really necessary to do some, like, where are we right now? And where do we want to be? And what are those gaps and how do we get there? The working group was convened, as I mentioned, thanks to Dr. Blunt and Dino, who stepped in and convened an extraordinary group of, I said, students, faculty, and staff around the college. We looked at, what kinds of expertise do we need to actually pull off this effort? And one of our first and major tasks out of this was to understand, what are the students' experience? What's their real life experience right now? What do they find? What's working for them? What's not working for them? What do they, don't necessarily tell us? So we created a student survey around questions of diversity and equity that was sent out to all the students at RCC. We got over 300 responses. And then we started involving students. We back up. The students were involved in helping us to create the survey, and they were helped. Their input was invaluable from every step. But we also took our student involvement to another level, that we recruited and put together an opportunity for 10 students to serve as interns. And thank you, Dr. Baston, for helping to support that. They were interns in an academic course, either a psychology course or a marketing and business course. They helped us to identify and strategize and put together, we did 5 different focus groups around the campus. The students got training about how to participate in running a focus group and how to record the information, how to listen for themes, and capture that information. And then they also helped work with us to analyze the results, to work specifically with the committee, looking what are we finding out from each one of the committees, the different groups that we had. Are we hearing common themes, or are we hearing themes that relate to one or particular affinity groups on campus? And out of that, again, working with the students and the whole committee, we started analyzing the results, and then we started taking it to the steps. What are the recommendations for concrete actions that we can take based on this work? We also completed an equity scorecard this semester, which supports the Melissa's office of the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. We also began to draft templates for an equity dashboard that I believe Melissa is going to share like a first iteration with you, which is very exciting, to make our work very transparent, that there will be work that we'll be sharing on a regular basis with the entire college campus, but there's also part of this work and where we are will be shared with the entire Rockland community. We'll go out and we hope that it will be live, that this is not just going to be once and done, but this is an ongoing effort, and it will show like where we are in trying to meet some of these very important goals. We drafted a template for the dashboard, as I said, and that's really going to be continuing. We also, as part of that, delivered more than 40 very specific recommended actions that I believe Melissa included, I think almost all, if not all of them, in the draft diversity report that everybody's going to get a chance to see soon, I hope. And so this really contributed to very specific actions that we're recommending for the college to take.
I mean, it's almost like we had a self-study in a way, that we really, as an institution, thought deeply not only about the students, but also about the faculty and staff and others in the college community. And in that way, we are ahead of the game and really talking about the true value of this work. Would you agree, Stephen?
Yeah, I completely agree. It was, it was really, again, these are sometimes uncomfortable conversations to have. That's why, things like surveys are really helpful, so people can be very honest in their responses. But it's also really then great, people give you their first response, but then doing the groups, the focus groups, where you can have like very in-depth conversations, very targeted conversations in a safe space, but get at the very specific issues and really open our eyes to, especially from the student's perspective, what's working and what's not, what's missing, and what could we do specifically to get better to promote equity and inclusivity on our campus.
And that's really what makes a learning institution. A learning institution can be reflective. A learning institution can be thoughtful. A learning institution can recognize it doesn't know all that it thinks it knows. And that, like our students, that we are promoting grit and we're promoting sort of mindfulness and all of these sort of things, that those same principles can apply in like fashion to an educational institution. Melissa, could you talk a little bit about so how did the recommendations that came from the groups, how are they manifesting?
Sure. So we finally will have our Inclusive Excellence Plan, and it does include recommendations from the Employee Experience Working Group, as well as the Steps Beyond Statements Working Group. In addition, it includes recommendations from the executive cabinet members and their senior staff, and finally includes continuing or unfinished action items from the prior plan. The new plan covers the period from academic year 21-22, so this year, through academic year 25-26. And it's going to, or does include 6 goals. And they quickly are: goal 1 is going to talk about employee recruitment, retention, and promotion. Goal 2 will talk about student recruitment, retention, graduation, and transfer. Goal 3 will talk about diverse and inclusive curriculum adaptation and development. Goal 4 will talk about diversity and non-discrimination professional development. Goal 5 will talk about communicating our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our public events, in our displays, our student organizations, various publications, and our community engagement strategy. And Goal 6 talks about demonstrating our campus-wide commitment to inclusive excellence. Each goal includes 3 to 5 objectives. Here you can see from a snapshot that we took of the draft version on the website. So it's the actual plan, but we are building out the website to show it. So it's currently protected. But here you can see that for each goal, they all look the same. You'd have the goal with the objectives immediately following it. So in this case, you're looking at goal 2, focusing on student recruitment, retention, graduation, and transfer. You see the 4 objectives that come below it. We hope that the website will be ready to launch for the first week of June so that everyone will have an opportunity to click through it. It does, though, allow for the expansion of the objectives to see the action items. So each objective includes 3 to 29 action items for a total of approximately 200 action items that will be included in the Inclusive Excellence Plan. So we do think the plan is quite comprehensive. It covers, it covers every area of the college. Each action item is tied to an executive committee member who is accountable for making sure we complete it. Each executive cabinet member will delegate responsibility for getting the work done for each of these action items to departments or committees or various individuals who will do the hands-on work for this. On the website, you will be able to open each objective by clicking the caret. So here, which will show you a drop down that will include each of the action items. It will include who the accountable party is. So in this case, the accountable party for action 1 is the Vice President of Enrollment Management and Student Affairs. And it will include the time period that the work will need to be done. And so in this case, the time period is from this academic year all the way through academic 25-26.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those implementation measures as you see them.
Sure. We'll start off with Christina talking about what's already been done for employee experience.
Certainly. So I'll just kind of take you through it in terms of what's been done under each working group category. So starting with team 1, which was around candidacy, the recommendations, as you can see, really focused on making sure that we are maximizing opportunities to recruit diverse and various candidates for our position, well-qualified individuals for the positions open at the college, really making sure that the quality of our search committees, that they undergo training to make sure they know what to look for, and any legalities around being part of a search committee, that they are well informed. And then where practice differs from written search procedures, the recommendation was that written procedure should trump, which was a general recommendation, which is already followed. But in terms of status updates on what many of these, I should preface this by saying many of these recommendations and the owners of these lies in the human resources department. So I am kind of the mouthpiece for Natalie today, but Melinda, please feel free to hop in if I misspeak, or if you can provide additional clarity. But to speak to the recommendations that were offered, what has been done so far is that we've really been utilizing social media. So LinkedIn, for example, is something that we're not really maximizing before, and now we are. Also looking at where can we spread this information where we have a footprint. So faculty or staff that are going to conferences, professional conferences, if they have message boards or job boards, that we're sharing that information as well at conferences. Also making sure, again, speaking to the second bullet point around search committee members and making sure that they're properly trained. Confidentiality agreements are in place, and there is training that will be forthcoming for the search committees as well. So that is in progress. For the new hire team, the recommendations largely was around having some kind of sequence of events that consistently happens for most employees, starting here at the college, to help onboard them. And so, whether that's meetings with their direct supervisors, setting goals for what must be accomplished or learned within the first, 60 to 90 days, depending on, the probationary status of their contract, if they're a union employee, for example, but making sure that they are connecting with their supervisors, that they are being trained, that there are resources available to them, that they are connecting back with human resources for feedback, so that we know how their experience has been so far within the first 90 days to a year that they're with us. So some of the status updates that Human Resources has been working on is that they have really been utilizing, as you know, we now have LinkedIn Learning as something that we can utilize, that we all can utilize now, employees and students. And so they're utilizing LinkedIn Learning modules heavily to help with the onboarding process for both new hires and managers, because something that came out of our discussions was around, maybe new supervisors, those who have never directly supervised anyone before, they may need support and training on how to properly onboard someone. So we'll utilize LinkedIn Learning for that. Also, stay tuned, but there should be more information if it hasn't already been shared, but there will be a new hire meet and greet with Human Resources on May 19th to, again, check in and see how your experience has been, particularly for those who were hired and brought on board during the pandemic when we were all at home. So that's going to be an exciting event coming up. For Team 3, professional development and achievement, a lot of the recommendations was around identifying initiatives under 5 themes that allow the college to acknowledge the importance of professional development and just making sure that's really built into the fabric and culture of RCC. So some things that are being done currently with human resources, and that is ongoing as a project, is around tuition reimbursement and making it very clear on who is eligible for tuition reimbursement and providing those opportunities for employees who want to go back to school or continue school. Utilizing LinkedIn Learning, as was previously mentioned. We've also started a lunch and learning series. And so that, I believe there was something around maybe personality assessments, I think, I missed that one. But I heard that that was really well received, and they'll continue doing that series, as well as department and division specific training. So I know I can speak from, as a member of the EMSA division, we all had participated in a customer service training, which was really helpful. And so being that many of us are very student facing and making sure that we are providing excellence in customer service. And then also leadership training. It was also implemented as well for those who are middle managers and emerging leaders. And so that series has launched and will continue. And then lastly, with transitions, the recommendations were after the employee leaves, the college should stay in touch, right? We want to continue to keep those lines of communication open and opportunities to have them connected to the college, as well as training and conversations that should start really before an employee leaves. So again, having more of a smoother transition out. So a couple of things that have been done. I believe we've always had an exit survey of some sort, but really making sure that we're intentional about reviewing the results of those surveys and highlighting any, trends or, things that really should be directly dealt with if we're starting to see certain things come up on exit surveys. So utilizing that tool for feedback, and then also just making sure that an employee knows how much leave they're going to be paid out, and they can start planning financially for what they can expect if they're going to be transitioning from the college. So there's a standardized letter now that comes from payroll to employees that will be transitioning out to give that information.
I mean, Christina, it really sounds like the employee experience group not only has done an amazing job at making recommendations, but to have seen the implementation of those recommendations, a good bit of those recommendations, how does that make you feel? Does it give you hope that we're sort of, meeting people where they said they needed us to meet them?
I think so. As someone who's benefited from a couple things on here, it was really helpful for me. Like when I'm personally, I'm very invested in professional development. And so being able to participate in like the leadership trainings and, having access to LinkedIn Learning, which is something I had to pay for before, and now I don't have to, and so I think it's a very positive thing to know that we are hearing what people are saying that they need, and that we're not just hearing, but actually doing something about it. And I think this really shows that we're serious. And that's why I really love the fact that at the end of all of this, because sometimes, you can be on committees and do a lot of work and have a lot of conversations, and then a year later, nothing's different. So the fact that a built-in part of that was to make sure that, okay, recommendations have been given, let's have an implementation timeline, I think really pushed a lot of this forward, because there was an owner and then there was a reasonable amount of time given to make sure that these things were pushed forward.
And clarity about the expectations. I think it is very difficult sometimes when we have various initiatives where there's no real clarity about expectations. And so as you've just laid out, that was a critical piece. Stephen, could you give us some sense of what has already been done to implement steps beyond statement recommendations?
Absolutely. So I already mentioned a number of the projects that have already resulted in a number of very important actions, and that we will be following up with, including working closely with Melissa's diversity and equity report. But I want to focus in on one of the projects within the Steps Beyond Statements activity that is very interesting and is getting a lot of requests for folks wanting to know, like, how are you doing this? We want to also work on this as well. And that's, we received a grant from Jobs for the Future and SUNY to look at and expand the model that we've created, our first year experience course, or what we call the ITTS course, Intro to the School of whatever our, one of our 5 schools plus honors. that's really helping to bridge the gap between secondary and higher ed. So let me stop there for a second and say, we have done tremendous work the last several years in transforming, I think, all aspects of RCC through the guided pathways model, creating the schools, configuring pathways, helping students get on a path, and all the activities that contribute to guided pathways, which we think will already resulting in greater student success and will be even more so in the future. But what about all those students in Rockland County who don't see themselves as coming to any education or training beyond high school, if
Right.
that? And what is the pathway to the pathway? Bridging that gap that people always talked about so much, but what are some mechanisms? And we think this may be one, that we are taking the college success course and putting it in the high schools. So we're testing this model to provide early engagement and support, particularly for the marginalized, underrepresented students in our high schools, students who have been least likely to progress to and through post-secondary ed. We know the students we already get to participate in many of our RCC courses in the high school are the top performing students. And when I talk to the administrators and the teachers in the high school, so that becomes like you're doing really well. So now you can take a college course in the high school. But what about all those other students that are not being served and really in some ways have been left behind? We set a goal and said, all right, we're going to try this. We started it over the summer and actually early about a year ago, was having conversations with a number of high school administrators, telling them about this project, asking if they wanted to be interested in it. North Rockland said yes right away, and so did Ramapo, the Ramapo School District. Set a goal of training about maybe 5 faculty members at high school to do this. I hope to get maybe, 50 to 75 students if I was lucky. The course expanded way beyond what we thought was going to be possible in 1 year. We created this high school version. We trained over last summer 6 high school faculty members at North Rockland and Ramapo, at Spring Valley. And they started doing the course in the fall, and there was some very interesting and different models, which I love because we were testing out, how the flexibility of this effort and models that they could use. And North Rockland, they're already doing a wonderful model in the high schools. I think they're the only high school in Rockland doing it. I don't know about anywhere else is doing this as well. They've taken our model of co-requisite writing courses where students, who are not quite at the college level, and instead of putting them into prerequisite developmental writing courses, which we used to do here with many ways disastrous results, we created barriers and obstacles that were often too high for students to surmount. We put in this co-requisite model, and we're fully engaged in that at RCC. Right now, if you go to a high school, we use multiple measures to place you, and you either place directly into a first-year writing course or the first-year writing course with the support model, and that's allowed many more students to succeed. North Rockland's been using that model. They made it to a full year with those students, and then they said, we want to add to that the college success course. And that's a really interesting model. At Ramapo, they decided and at Spring Valley, let's do a semester-long college success course, but let's open it not just to seniors, but let's open it to any high school students at any level. And over the course of this year, we've had over 290 students in the high school go through these courses, greatly exceeding our expectation. And there's tremendous interest in Rockland County at our high schools about expanding this next year and expanding it sometimes into very particular populations of students, like our P-TECH students and our smart scholars. So I'm very excited about that. There's also a lot of interest. We had a great summit this morning with high school administrators at RCC. Had a wonderful breakfast and conversation with them. Talked a little bit about this project and gave them an update on the project. And there's a number of other high schools that are interested in expanding it. And when I go out to other colleges, I'm going to be part of doing a presentation tomorrow at the SUNY Success Summit, talking about this. A lot of interest in other SUNY schools. And earlier this semester, Katie Lynch and Emily Gerace, Emily was my coordinator on this project. They had an opportunity to go to the national a conference on first year experience, and they talked about what we're doing, including talking about this project. And there was a lot of interest in what Rockland's doing here. So I think along with the whole steps beyond statements process, there's, the belief that, Rockland's doing something that are really creating new models. So I'm very excited about this work.
We're very proud of you and the work that is being done, because in fact, this is part of what we were trying to do, that we said we wanted to really show that we could have a national impact in the work that we were doing toward inclusive excellence. And if we can get more marginalized and minoritized students into programs where they currently are not getting those opportunities, there's a new path to a path that can make a difference for them. And so we got to be very proud as an institution that this is happening. Melissa, how will the campus be informed of any progress on the plan that's been laid out?
Thank you. So as Stephen mentioned earlier, implementation and transparency are incredibly important to us. And so with the equity scorecard, we plan to share information on a consistent basis with the college community. The equity scorecard as designed will include 3 sections. The first section is going to have the dashboard that will include key demographic information. So with the help of institutional research and effectiveness, working alongside with strategic marketing, we've started to put together what the first dashboard will look like. Here we're showing demographic information for our students. It will appear on the college website and therefore will be viewable by anyone. The data that we're showing here is from fall 2021 and shows overall percentages as well as percentages by school. We'll include similar information with charts for faculty, both full and part-time, staff, which includes members of the administrators union, grant employees, civil service employees, and hourlies, and administration, which includes leadership and other exempt employees that aren't picked up by some of our other categories. The demographic information will also extend to pick up graduation and transfer rates for key demographics for our students. So this just gives you an idea of the type of data that we will show on a regular basis and what it will look like. The second portion of the equity scorecard is going to really be a status bar. It will only be viewable on My RCC, so you have to have RCC credentials to access it. Here you see that will show status of the action items. For items that have not been started, we will show when the work is scheduled to begin. For work that has begun but is not completed yet, we will show that it's in progress. For work that has been completed or that is ongoing in nature, we will show it was completed as of or that it's ongoing. This information will be updated 2 times per year by the responsible party. So that's the person, committee, or department that has been identified by the executive cabinet member to take care of the action item that we mentioned earlier. Again, close to 200 action items within the plan, broken down by goal and objective based on the type of action we're asking to take place. The third section is it's a little bit of a catch-all. It's hard to imagine, but even with close to 200 action items, we know that there are going to be things that creative people on our campus will come up with that really address some of the issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion on our campus. Well, we don't want to miss those items. We want to be able to capture those as well. And so in section 3, we'll collect diversity, equity, and inclusion actions that have taken place but are not specifically included in the Inclusive Excellence Plan. This information, like in section 2, will be updated 2 times a year by the responsible party, so the department, committee, or individual who's been identified by the executive cabinet member to have access to update this information. All of this information will be posted on MyRCC, so again, viewable by anybody who has RCC credentials. But in some cases, the information will be relevant also to others outside of our campus, and so we will make it public to anybody who accesses our college website. That might include, as indicated here with some of the examples, the HEAT Award, as Dr. Baston talked about earlier, would be something that we would want to share not only internally, but externally as well. Strategic marketing is working on the page design for the portal and how the information will be collected from the responsible parties. That work will continue during the summer with the goal of being ready to share it with the college campus by September 1, so that every semester we will go ahead and ask for updates so that information can again be transparent to members of our community.
That's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about some next steps. I mean, clearly you have a lot laid out in terms of the employee experience work and some of the work and steps beyond statements, and you've laid out pretty much how we're going to keep the community involved. We mentioned at the top of our time together that we would have new steps beyond statements chairs. Why don't we introduce LaToya Blunt and Dino Rosatos, and they are going to be fantastic. How are you all doing? You, LaToya and Dino, you're inheriting quite an interesting set of work from extraordinary leaders who've been really at this work. What are your thoughts? Why don't you share with the folks sort of what you're thinking?
I'll go, LaToya, you want to go first?
Okay, go ahead, Dino.
All right,
You
so
can go.
I mean, it was an amazing experience being part of Steps Beyond Statement. I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of people, and working with them directly and sharing our experiences on this campus in terms of what we do and how that we were able to use that to really, get the whole process going, planning, implementing, working collaboratively with both ourselves and the students. We really got to know a lot, not just in terms of numerical data, but in terms of, real time with real people about what they're actually, what they're seeing, what their concerns are. And we were able to put a really effective plan together. So, I was honored. I am privileged, humbled to have worked with so many great people. And, with LaToya, my partner, I'm really, really honored to continue this on the whole new level and continue bringing forward, examining what the needs are for the RCC community at large, for our students to continue making this a accommodating and supporting campus for everybody. So I had a great experience. I was honored, and I'm even more honored to continue this legacy and this tradition going forward.
Thank you, Dino.
Thank you, Dino. I was honored as well. I think what worked and what I'm looking forward to is that Dino and I come from two different sides of the college. So he's coming from academic, I'm coming from student affairs, but it helped with this type of work because I got the experience of hearing it from him as a program director and a faculty, and he heard from me as someone that's always on the student side most of the time. And so I was able to give the pushback that was needed to Dino, and he the same for me, but we were able to hear both sides to come up with realistic expectations, especially with handling and working with the working group. And I think we did a great job with the working group. We had some really great people. Most importantly, I enjoyed having the students because, again, this is all done to help them. So if they are not a part of the conversation and we don't give them a seat at the table, then we're not doing our due diligence. So I really appreciated having the students there and letting them know it was okay to be their authentic self. In the beginning, they were so quiet, they didn't want to say anything. And everyone that knows me, no, I don't like that. So I said, no, we need to hear from you. And so when they got more comfortable with us, that's when the real work for me began, because they were able to know that we were actually on their side and trying to make things better for the overall college, and they are a part of the college. So I was honored to work with Dino and under Allegra and Stephen as well, with the help of JoJo, of course, and he dealt with us and our antics, and I appreciate him for that. And I'm looking forward to what's to come.
Oh, fantastic. Folks, if you're interested in asking some questions from this great group, please put those questions in the chat and we will be able to acknowledge your questions. So if you have any questions for this group at this time, put it in the chat so that we can lift the question for the group. I have another question for the group before we take any questions from the chat. And this question is to everyone. Now, having had the opportunity to participate in whichever way you did in this experience, what has this experience meant for you? What did you learn maybe that you didn't know? And what do you take away from this experience? Why don't we start with you, Stephen?
Thanks. I think I'll follow up on Latoya's comment because I think she really hit it right. It was great. It's always great, to involve the students, but that's a challenge sometimes itself because they're a little hesitant sometimes. They're a little concerned about what they say, if they're too honest, how that's going to work, and they have their things you share with your teachers and the administration, and things they might they know themselves or they share with their friends. But we had to get their buy-in and their trust to understand their lived experience, because that's what it really is. We want to make sure that we are an equitable and inclusive college for everybody, for the staff, the faculty, and the students. But it's all about the students. So understanding and getting them to trust us, and getting to hear, even if it's uncomfortable, where we are not living up to the ideals that we say we have, and then thinking about, and again consulting with them about how do you think we get to that, and what are the steps we need to take to get to that. And that was always, I always want to hear, and it's just many revelations, and we fed that into the report and the recommendations we gave to Melissa.
Thank you, Stephen. How about you, Melissa? What sort of do you take away from all of this?
I think it's really important to have the more than buy-in, the full support of executive leadership with regard to getting this work done. We undertook work with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion plan at the behest of SUNY years ago. I think we did some really good work, but we may not have had the full support of executive leadership at the time. What is clear to me between the differences between that first go round and this go round is what feels like complete support from executive leadership. It is something that is critical in order to be successful in this area, and it is one of the areas that we talk about in Goal 6 about how supportive we need the executive cabinet to be to make this work fulfilling for the entire campus and effective for all of our constituents.
Thank you, Melissa. Christina, what about you?
So, I think a big takeaway for me was working on these different working groups really was, you really can't underestimate the power of collective agency. I think bringing so many cross sections of employees to the table to talk about our experiences. I think, while our jobs may be different, our job responsibilities may be different, I think our values are very similar across the college. And I feel like that was a reminder that as much as we can be in our silos, and sometimes we can have conflicts, we're really all here for the same thing. And we're very tied to our passion of helping students. And I think that came out a lot in our conversations and wanting to make sure that we as employees were taken care of, because we're part of this community too. So if we take care of what's important to us, we can then also be in a better position to take care of what matters to our students. And so I think that was something that really resonated.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Latoya?
Sorry. For me, it goes back to what Melissa said about having the buy-in from the executive board or committee here. along with that, or why I say that is because the students really stated that they don't mind sharing their thoughts, opinion, and taking the surveys that we send, but they want to really see that what they're asking is being implemented. And I don't think we were doing a good enough job of implementing the things that they actually want to make them feel included and a part of RCC. And if we are looking for long-term, and if we are looking at recruitment tools and recruitment options, the best form of recruitment is by word of mouth. So if we're not doing what we can to meet their needs, they're not going to tell it to other people, and they're not going to share the wonderful things that we do actually do here. So for me, it's actually implementing the things that the students are asking for. That's what I took away, and that's what my next steps will be as the co-chair.
Excellent. And Dino.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what everyone said, we can't understate the importance of the students. And we took this on a very micro level in the sense that we spoke to them directly and got to hear from them where, areas of improvement are needed. And then from there, we went back to the planning stage and then worked and how to get those weaknesses and, overcome them. And this is a living, breathing operation. And that's another thing that, that I am very pleased to be part of. It's not over. We continue, we go forward. What we've seen in this past year, and we've seen a lot, what we've seen was, the concerns that students had, and what we're going to see a year or two down the road may not be the same. So keeping this going, keeping this whole entire, structure in place is going to serve for the better and the greater good of, the students and the campus overall. And, it's great. It's just a great kind of experience and a great process to be part of. History in the making.
I love it. History in the making. There were no questions in the chat because you all were so thoroughly extraordinary in your presentations. Everyone, would you give them all a hand by your reaction button to say thank you to all of the wonderful folks who were a part of this wonderful conversation. Coffee and conversations are so important, and to have these extraordinary leaders who are taking the lead and helping us to become that inclusively excellent institution that we desire to be. Now, don't forget, this week, we still have a few events in our Unity in the Community program, and we have next week's Coffee and Conversations on strategic planning. Don't miss that. And of course, Spring Fest tomorrow. I want to see your face in the place when we are celebrating all that is spring and all that is you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being on this Coffee and Conversation. And until tomorrow, take care.